Welcome to the Truth and Dare podcast with Dr. Nandi, where we shine a light on how embracing everyday vulnerabilities helps us live fuller and more authentic lives. Tune into our podcast to hear how women practice accepting and loving the most vulnerable parts of themselves. And then stay for the pep talks about creating the space to do it yourself. Are you ready to jump into this episode, sis? Yes? All right? Then let's get it. Welcome to the Truth and Dare podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Nandi, and today we're talking about an important truth, that we must find beauty in the breakdown. I love Christmas. When I tell you that I love Christmas, you absolutely wouldn't believe how much I love Christmas. I mean, I sit and will turn on Christmas music in January for my birthday, but that's still really close to the holiday. In March when I need to pick me up, and July when I am wishing for Christmas. And then I start playing and putting things up around Halloween. And I know that there are people that have very strong feelings about what this is supposed to be like. I'm letting you know that my official Christmas season starts on October 31st, okay? Don't at me, okay? And I love Christmas for all of the things festive. I love the lights. Because I'm a winter baby, I really love the snow. And sometimes there's snow, especially where I'm from, around Christmas time. And just in general, the celebration of life and the time with family that comes along with it. So during one Christmas holiday, I actually went on a cruise with my fiance, and we had an incredible time. And I loved it because the entire cruise, even though it was after Christmas, was still decked out with the trees and the lights and all the good stuff. It was just absolutely beautiful. During cruises, if you know anything about cruises, there are lots of activities, and they decided to play a series of movies during this cruise. And one of them happened to be my favorite Christmas movie, which is called The Holiday. And I have seen this movie so many times. I know so many of the lines. It has some of my favorite actors and actresses in it. And I wouldn't think that seeing it again, especially on a big screen over a pool deck, would make a difference. But for some reason it did. So I forced my fiance to watch The Holiday with me on a ship over the Christmas season. And I'm seeing everything. I'm saying the lines. He's laughing about it. And then this particular scene comes up. And I've seen the scene a lot. It's very heart-wrenching. The woman leaves and then she comes back and decides to take a chance on love. And there is a song that plays during that time period. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because on TVs now you've got closed captioning. You can actually see what the song is. But I don't think I ever realized that it actually had words to it. And so I'm listening to the song and I hear the words for the first time, and it talks about how within every breakdown, there's actually a lot of beauty. And I'm like, oh, my little heart, I'm so poetic. I'm like, oh yes, who wrote this? This is absolutely incredible. I love it so much. But there was something deeper inside of me. I have a really strong intuition, discernment, still small voice. And something told me to brace. I could feel it physically. Something told me to brace. And boy, did I need it. When I tell you all, the next year was wild as hell. It was so wild. And I was like, I thought I had gotten over this. I didn't have any more dark nights of the soul coming. I'm not going to go through any more hard things because I already went through really hard things a few years ago. Not the truth at all. And so I want to talk to you today about the 3 things I did in order to find the beauty that was in the breakdown of that next year, compliments of being encouraged by that song on that Christmas cruise. So the 3 things that I did in order to capitalize on the beauty and the breakdown of the next year was first to break open, second to break through, and then to break free. So let me talk to you a little bit about breaking open. So I actually had to reframe the context that I heard as I saw and heard the word breakdown. When I saw and heard breakdown, I was like, okay, I'm falling apart. There's no way I'm going to stay together. Things are so bad that there's no way for me to actually be okay. Especially after having such a good season and now having bad things happen and, just things I wasn't expecting. And so in this season, I actually had to tell myself, Nandi, this is a breaking open. I had to let all of the places in my life sort of fall where they were going to. And this was not easy because in that year, I began to have a lot of relationship challenges with my fiance. As my mentor, Mike would say, our relationship had a time period that was on the dark side of the moon. It was really, really challenging. In this season, I also noticed the ways in which I was interacting with really close friends and how I was really dependent on some of their affirmation and their co-signing on the things that I was doing. And I wasn't getting as many, hey, girlfriends, that's great, as I had in the past. And it felt some type of way. And in that moment, I was questioning some of those friendships and began to realize and allowing it to break me open that it was more about how I was showing up and what I needed in those relationships and actually less about how they were actually going. And when I tell you the year was hard, it was really, really hard because not only did those things happen, and there were many events that coincided and were a part of those two sort of categories in my life, but also my dad's illness developed even further, and he ended up passing away. And I don't know how many listeners are parentless or are missing a parent, but something in you changes when that happens. No matter what your relationship was like with that person, no matter when they passed, it was a long time ago or it was as recent as today. Something happens to you. It changes you. And I had a very challenging relationship with my father, and I worked really hard at it to have it be where it was when he passed. He left, and he and my mom got divorced when I was 5, and then we tussled a lot when I was young, and then I decided didn't want to be somebody with daddy issues, and so over the past sort of the 10 years before he passed away, I spent building the relationship and getting to a good place. And so when he passed, there was a lot of sadness, a lot of grief, but there was still a little bit of relief of like, okay, now he's not suffering anymore. And there's still a part of me, the little girl in me, that wasn't suffering anymore either because I didn't have to work so hard at the relationship. And yet still there was so much heartbreak, but I just had to let it happen. And that's the lesson here around breaking open. I had to realize that in this instance, I couldn't go back to before the Christmas cruise where my life was rocking and rolling and I had everything that I wanted. There was no going back to that. And so in letting it happen, I welcomed the undoing that occurred. The second thing I did in order to capitalize on beauty in the breakdown was really around breaking through. Now, let me tell you this. I was the type of kid who had temper tantrums. So when all of this started happening in my life, after all the self-work I've done and the thousands of dollars that I've spent in therapy and everything that I did to sort of safeguard and protect my life from ever having bad experiences, just so naive, right? Having bad experiences again in the future, I wanted to curl up in a ball and hide. I'm like, just give me a month or two. Let me just ride out. Like, I'll come back to this thing called life. And breaking through for me was after all these things occurred, choosing to surrender to the process. I had no idea what the next day would bring. I had no idea how I was even going to feel on a day-to-day basis. But instead of running away from it, I ran toward it. I went toward the pain so that I could experience the process fully. And there was one thing I really held on to as I was breaking through, which was around my belief that post-traumatic growth was possible for me. Oftentimes we hear about post-traumatic stress. It's all about how life can be so much worse after traumatic things happen. And I'll tell you, not just my father dying, but the experiences that I had with my friends and with my fiance, they were traumatic. And also I held on to the belief that growth was possible on the other side, not just stress, not just downfall, not just depression. And this was different for me than experiences that I'd had in the past where I did curl up in a ball and I went and hid and I didn't talk to anybody and I fell into depression. I was like, I will never go back to that place. So I did change. Things did get better, but it wasn't that there were no bad experiences. It was that my ability to deal with them was actually different. And so that's what I did. I held on to the belief that post-traumatic growth was possible. And each and every day I learned something new. I would sit and journal. I would meditate. I would pray. I spent time with spirit, just really aligning myself to what do I want on the other side of this for myself? How do I get there? How do I do that in partnership with my friends, in partnership with my fiance, in partnership with life in general, in partnership even in talking to my dad, even though he had passed on. And post-traumatic growth did begin to occur. I was able to recognize how the ocean smelled and how good the air felt on my skin. These were small wins, the way that the sun poured into me. And as it began to build, I noticed the goodness in some of those conversations with friends, or the time that we spent, my fiance and I, having hard conversations and coming to some agreement where he was heard and I was heard. I mean, just really powerful stuff that could only happen in choosing to break through. When you avoid it, you can't get it. It's the breaking through that gets you there. So I want you to know that you have to go through these experiences presently. You've got to be present to the experience in order to get the breakthrough. You can't glide through it. You can't numb yourself through it. That's not breaking through. That is like waddling your way through. And so what we're looking for here is to be present every step of the way. No skipping, no passing go, none of that good stuff. You're in the experience. You're getting present to the experience for what it is. And you're finding gratitude and learnings and what's next from the present moment. And it may not look like much, but you're taking a little bit at a time and then you're building on it and you're scaffolding up. And then lastly, after breaking open and breaking through, I chose to break free. And this part of breaking free wasn't some grand gesture. It wasn't about changing my life or shaving off my hair or making a declaration. That's not where freedom came from for me. Freedom, breaking free, came from radical self-acceptance, that this is where I am. And not only could I not go back and have what I had, but I also couldn't go back and be who I was again. I could not go back to that person. I was new because I had gone through something and I had grown through something. And so I asked myself to begin to admire that person. So instead of being in the imprisonment of, I should be this old Dr. Nandi, this is what it should look like. This is what it should feel like. Instead, I started to look at my scars and my battle wounds. I started to feel into what was the identity of someone who didn't have her father with her anymore and who had to speak to him as if he were here, even though he wasn't. When I looked at those scars, when I got present to what things really were, when I began to admire how my life was and what it had become, I saw that it was actually beautiful. I didn't need to go back. I didn't need to have anything else. And each day that I was able to rebuild, I was able to notice how admiring it helped my life, every part of my life, how being present with it in the breakthrough and the acceptance of what it was telling me and what it was becoming had me break free. What I was able to get on the other side of this was true commitment in relationship. And really working and partnering with my fiance, I was able to also create some new boundaries in my friendships and figuring out what does it look like if there isn't that codependence there or that need for affirmation, validation there. What gets to be different? How mature does the friendship get to become? And in having these conversations with my father beyond the grave, what I was able to do was take what was mine, but also feel free without guilt, without shame, to give back the things that were his. So the fear of abandonment, the issues around rejection, not being wanted, the things that came along with being in relationship with him on the human plane, I actually was able to give back to him. And I felt that weight release from me, that grief release from me in a really, really powerful way. And let me tell you, it's not just the feeling of breaking free that actually happens and sort of feeling the shifts. Oh, it feels better in these relationships. No, I got real results. I'm talking new house, new city, renewed relationships, renewed choices available to me. So I want you to know that breaking free, it really creates acceptance. But the acceptance is what creates your freedom. It creates your freedom because you're no longer bound to what things used to be. Instead, you're connected to what things are now, which means from that place, you can build into the future. Sis, what I thought was a breakdown. Not only was it beautiful, but there was no mistake in it. There was no accident in it. It was absolutely meant for me. And it was meant for me to break open and then to break through and finally to break free. And that is actually the process that we use in the Truth Then Dare movement. It is built on those three principles that when we choose to break open, choose to break through, and choose to break free, our lives are completely different and distinct than what we once had because we're willing to go through the process to transform, to have our lives be different, either because we looked at our lives differently or because things actually changed and we had new experiences on the other side of it. And so I encourage you, if any of you all are in a situation right now that looks like a breakdown, you get to reframe it. You get to understand that that breakdown is actually an invitation for you to break open, break through, and break free. And I promise you, if you choose to do this, man, you get to watch how your life transforms too. If you enjoyed today's podcast, I invite you to join us and listen to the other podcasts that are a part of this season. We're really excited as the Truth and Dare movement to welcome you and being a part of this family, a part of this sisterhood. And if you're yearning for more real and authentic conversations, subscribe to the podcast. If you want to learn more about the Truth and Dare movement, go to truththendare.com, sign up for my email list, and check out my services and offerings, including live events. We encourage you to listen, we encourage you to comment, and we encourage you to share your stories with us too at hello@truththendare.com. And most importantly, we dare you to dream. Until next time, take care.